In the bustling heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, Alexander Alex Whitmore was a name that commanded respect. At just 34 years old, Alex had built an empire from scratch. He was known for his sharp mind, relentless ambition, and a lifestyle most people could only dream of. His penthouse apartment overlooked Central Park. His wardrobe consisted of tailored suits worth more than some people's annual salaries, and his calendar was packed with meetings, deals, and high-profile parties. Yet despite all his success, Alex often felt like something was missing. But he pushed those thoughts aside, convincing himself that winning was the only thing that mattered. One Friday evening, Alex hosted one of his signature gatherings at his lavish penthouse. The room buzzed with energy as guests mingled over champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Among them were Alex's closest friends, other wealthy entrepreneurs who shared his love for competition and excess. These men thrived on pushing boundaries, whether it was closing multi-million-dollar deals or coming up with outrageous challenges to test each other's limits. This particular night was no different. As the clock struck midnight, the conversation turned playful but provocative. One of Alex's friends, Marcus, leaned back in his chair, swirling his glass of whiskey. "You know, Alex," Marcus said with a smirk, "you've done everything there is to do. You've climbed every mountain, crushed every rival. But tell me, what's the one thing you haven't tried? Something completely out of your league." The question hung in the air, drawing curious glances from the others. Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Out of my league. Please, name it." Marcus exchanged a mischievous look with another friend before responding. "How about this? Marry someone. Let's say, someone from the complete opposite side of the spectrum. Someone who has nothing. Like, literally nothing. And not just for show. Stay married for 6 months. Prove you can handle it." Laughter erupted around the table, but Alex didn't join in. Instead, he sat silently, his competitive instincts kicking in. To him, this wasn't just a joke, it was a challenge, a bet. And Alex never backed down from a bet. "Fine," he said coolly, leaning forward. "I'll do it. But if I win, you're all treating me to a month-long vacation on your private islands." His friends roared with laughter, slapping the table in disbelief. They couldn't believe he'd actually agreed. "Deal," Marcus exclaimed, raising his glass. "But remember, Alex, you have to stick to the rules. No backing out, no loopholes. 6 months, married to someone who's living on the streets." The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, Alex woke up with a mix of excitement and apprehension. What had started as a drunken dare now felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Who would he choose? How would he even approach such a situation without sounding completely ridiculous? He knew finding someone willing to participate wouldn't be easy, but Alex thrived on challenges. Besides, he reasoned, it was just a game. A temporary arrangement. Nothing real. Or so he thought. That afternoon, while driving through the city in his sleek black car, Alex spotted her. She was sitting on a park bench, holding 2 small children close to her chest. Her clothes were worn, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and her face carried the weight of someone who had seen too much hardship. Despite her circumstances, there was a quiet strength in her eyes, a resilience that caught Alex's attention. He instructed his driver to pull over, his mind already racing with possibilities. Little did he know, this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The park was alive with the sounds of children laughing and leaves rustling in the breeze, but Emma Carter felt miles away from the cheerful atmosphere around her. Sitting on a weathered bench, she clutched her twin toddlers, Leela and Noah, close to her chest, shielding them from the chilly wind. Her mind raced with worries, where they would sleep that night, how she'd feed them tomorrow, and whether life would ever stop feeling like an endless uphill battle. For months, she had been living on the streets after losing her job and apartment. Each day was a struggle, yet Emma refused to let despair consume her. She sang softly to the twins, her voice trembling but determined, as if trying to convince herself that things would get better. It was then that a sleek black car pulled up near the curb. Out stepped Alexander Whitmore, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit that screamed wealth and power. He approached cautiously, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel path. Emma eyed him warily, unsure of what someone like him could possibly want with someone like her. When he finally spoke, his words were calm but direct. "Hi," he began, offering a polite smile. "I'm Alex. I noticed you here with your kids. Can we talk for a moment?" Emma hesitated, gripping the twins tighter. "About what?" she asked, her tone guarded. Alex took a deep breath, knowing how absurd this conversation might sound. "Look, I know this is going to come across as strange, but hear me out. I'm in a unique situation, and I think you might be able to help me. In return, I can offer you something too." Emma frowned, suspicion etched across her face. "Help you with what? And why are you even talking to me?" Alex knelt down slightly, trying to appear less intimidating. "I'll explain everything, I promise. But first, can I sit?" Without waiting for permission, he lowered himself onto the edge of the bench, careful not to wrinkle his suit. For several minutes he laid out his proposition, a marriage of convenience lasting 6 months, during which time Emma and her children would have access to financial security, shelter, and stability. In exchange, she simply had to play the role of his wife. At first, Emma thought it was some kind of cruel prank. Who in their right mind would propose such a thing? Yet, as Alex continued speaking, detailing the terms and assuring her that there would be no strings attached beyond the agreed time frame, doubt gave way to desperation. She glanced at Leela and Noah, their innocent faces lighting up as they played with a tattered stuffed animal. How many nights had they gone hungry because she couldn't afford groceries? How many times had she cried herself to sleep, praying for a miracle? "I don't understand," Emma said slowly, shaking her head. "Why would you do this? Why pick me?" Alex hesitated, debating how much truth to reveal. "Let's just say it's complicated, but I assure you, this isn't charity. It's a business arrangement. You get what you need, and I get what I need. No tricks, no hidden agendas." Emma studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. His expression remained steady, though there was a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes that surprised her. Still, she wasn't ready to trust him completely. "And when these 6 months are over, then what happens?" "Then we go our separate ways," Alex replied firmly. "No hard feelings, no obligations. You'll walk away with enough resources to start fresh, and I'll move on with my life." For Emma, the decision wasn't easy. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was reckless, that trusting a stranger, especially one as wealthy and powerful as Alex, was a recipe for disaster. But as she looked at her children, she realized she didn't have the luxury of pride or hesitation. If saying yes meant giving Leela and Noah a chance at a better life, then she owed it to them to take the risk. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I have conditions. My kids come first. Always. If anything makes me uncomfortable or threatens their safety, this deal is off." Alex nodded, relief washing over him. "Agreed. Your kids will be treated like royalty. You have my word." With that, the strangest agreement either of them had ever made was sealed. Over the next few days, arrangements were made swiftly and discreetly. A quiet courthouse wedding took place, attended only by a judge and a clerk. Emma wore a simple dress borrowed from a friend, while Alex looked every bit the billionaire groom in another perfectly tailored suit. As they exchanged vows, Emma couldn't shake the surreal feeling of standing beside a man she barely knew, reciting promises that felt hollow yet carried the weight of hope. When they arrived at Alex's penthouse later that evening, the contrast between their worlds became painfully clear. The opulent space, with its marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and panoramic views of the city skyline. Living under the same roof, Alex and Emma quickly realized just how different their worlds were. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of order and precision for Alex, now buzzed with the unpredictable energy of a young family. Toys scattered across the living room floor, tiny footprints marked the pristine marble tiles, and the sound of laughter, or occasional tantrums, filled the air. For Emma, this luxurious space felt like a dream she didn't quite belong in, while for Alex, it was a disruption to his meticulously controlled life. The first few days were awkward, to say the least. Alex tried to maintain his usual routine: early morning workouts, hours spent on conference calls, and evenings reviewing business reports. But no matter how hard he focused, there was always something pulling his attention away. A toddler giggling as they chased each other around the dining table, or Emma softly singing lullabies late at night. These moments weren't part of his plan, yet they kept creeping into his awareness, unsettling him in ways he couldn't explain. Emma, on the other hand, struggled to adjust to her new surroundings. Everything about the penthouse screamed wealth and privilege, things she had never experienced before. She felt out of place wearing designer clothes Alex insisted on buying for her, and she hesitated to touch anything expensive, fearing she might break it. Even simple tasks like cooking dinner became daunting when faced with a state-of-the-art kitchen stocked with gadgets she didn't know how to use. Still, she refused to let herself be intimidated. Every day, she reminded herself why she was here: for Leela and Noah. Their happiness gave her strength. Tensions between Alex and Emma began to surface almost immediately. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Alex walked into the living room to find toys strewn everywhere and juice spilled on the white carpet. His frustration boiled over. "Do you think you could clean up after yourself?" he snapped, gesturing toward the mess. Emma froze, clutching a towel in her hands. Her cheeks flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I'm sorry if my kids aren't neat enough for your standards," she shot back. "But maybe instead of complaining, you could help pick up a toy or two." Alex opened his mouth to retort but stopped himself. He hadn't expected her to stand up to him so boldly. Most people tiptoed around him, afraid to challenge the billionaire tycoon. But not Emma. There was fire in her eyes, a determination that intrigued him despite himself. As days turned into weeks, small moments of connection began to emerge amidst the clashes. One afternoon, Alex found himself watching Emma play with the twins in the park near their building. She laughed as Leela chased butterflies, her face lighting up with pure joy. It was a side of her he hadn't seen before, one that softened the sharp edges of her resilience. For the first time in years, Alex felt a pang of longing. Not for success or power, but for something simpler, something real. He started spending more time with the twins, initially out of curiosity, but soon because he genuinely enjoyed their company. Leela loved climbing onto his lap during story time, while Noah delighted in showing off his latest crayon drawings. At first, Alex wasn't sure what to do with them. He'd never been around children before, but their innocence and enthusiasm slowly broke down his defenses. They called him Mr. Alex at first, until Emma gently encouraged them to call him Dad. The word felt foreign on his tongue, but also strangely comforting. For Emma, seeing Alex interact with her children stirred conflicting emotions. On one hand, she appreciated the effort he was making. He wasn't just tolerating them. He was actively trying to be present. Yet she couldn't shake the nagging fear that this was all temporary. Once the 6 months were over, where would that leave her and the twins? Would Alex simply walk away, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives again? Despite their growing bond, misunderstandings continued to crop up. One night, after putting the twins to bed, Emma confronted Alex about his frequent absences. "You're always working," she said, folding her arms across her chest. "Is this really what you signed up for? Because it feels like you're still treating us like an obligation rather than a family." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm doing the best I can, Emma. This isn't easy for me either. I've never done anything like this before." "Well, Neither have I, she countered, her voice rising. But I'm here every single day, trying to make this work. And honestly, sometimes it feels like you don't care about anything beyond your stupid bet. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Bet. The word echoed in his mind, reminding him of the selfish reason he had brought her into his life in the first place. Guilt gnawed. As the weeks passed, Alex found himself increasingly curious about Emma. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, strong, resilient, and fiercely protective of her children. But there was also a sadness in her eyes, a quiet pain that hinted at a story far deeper than she let on. One evening, after tucking the twins into bed, Alex sat in his study, staring at his laptop screen. He told himself it was just idle curiosity, but deep down, he knew better. He wanted to understand her, to know what had brought her to the park that day, sitting on a bench with nothing but her kids and the clothes on her back. With a few clicks, Alex began digging into Emma's past. At first, he felt guilty about prying, but his need to uncover the truth outweighed his hesitation. What he discovered left him stunned. Emma hadn't always been homeless. In fact, just a few years ago, her life had looked completely different. She had been a promising medical student, excelling in her classes and working toward a future as a pediatrician. Her dreams had been shattered when tragedy struck. Her husband, the father of her twins, had died unexpectedly in a car accident. The loss devastated her emotionally, but it also plunged her into financial ruin. Medical bills piled up. Her part-time job wasn't enough to cover expenses, and eventually she lost her apartment. With no family to turn to and nowhere else to go, Emma and her children ended up on the streets. Alex leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. How could someone endure so much and still carry herself with such dignity? He thought about all the times he had judged her silently, the way she hesitated before touching expensive items, the way she seemed unsure of her place in his world. Now he understood why. It wasn't laziness or poor choices that had led her to homelessness. It was circumstance. Cruel, unrelenting circumstance. The revelation shook Alex to his core. For years, he had lived by a set of beliefs drilled into him by his own upbringing. Success was earned through hard work. Failure was a result of weakness, and everyone got what they deserved. But Emma's story challenged everything he thought he knew. Here was a woman who had worked tirelessly, pursued her dreams, and still fallen victim to forces beyond her control. And yet, despite it all, she hadn't given up. She fought every day for her children, refusing to let despair define them. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. He kept replaying fragments of their conversations in his head, seeing them in a new light. When Emma snapped at him for criticizing the mess in the living room, he realized now that it wasn't just frustration, it was pride. She was trying to hold on to whatever scraps of normalcy she could for her kids, even if it meant standing up to a billionaire. When she questioned his commitment to their family, it wasn't just anger, it was fear. Fear that this arrangement would end, leaving her and the twins right back where they started. The next morning, Alex decided to talk to her. He waited until after breakfast, when the twins were happily playing in their room, and approached Emma as she tidied up the kitchen. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone unusually soft. Emma turned to face him, her expression guarded. "About what?" I did some research," Alex admitted, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "About your past. I hope you're not mad. I didn't mean to invade your privacy. I wanted to understand." Emma froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "You looked into my life?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and vulnerability. "I know I shouldn't have," Alex said quickly, "but I needed to know. Emma, I had no idea what you've been through. Your husband, the accident, everything. I'm so sorry." For a moment, Emma said nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, unwilling to let him see her cry. "Why does it matter to you?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This whole thing is just a game to you, isn't it? A bet. So why bother learning about me at all? It's not like that anymore. Alex replied earnestly. When I made that stupid bet, I thought I was proving something. To myself, to my friends. But now I see how wrong I was. You're not just some pawn in my game, Emma. You're a person. A mother who's done everything in her power to protect her kids. And I admire that more than I can say. Emma studied him carefully, searching for any sign of insincerity. For once, she didn't see the polished billionaire or the man who thrived on winning. Instead, she saw someone struggling to make sense of his own mistakes. It was a side of Alex she hadn't expected, and one she wasn't sure she trusted yet. The days that followed Alex's confession were filled with an unspoken tension. Emma found herself watching him more closely, trying to decipher whether his words had been genuine or just another calculated move in his grand game. Meanwhile, Alex was grappling with his own emotions, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. He wanted to prove himself, to show Emma that he wasn't the same man who had entered into this arrangement for a reckless bet, but every attempt felt clumsy and inadequate. One Saturday morning, Alex decided to take matters into his own hands. He woke up early, brewed a pot of coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. By the time Emma emerged from her room, still half asleep and dressed in sweatpants, he had already spread out blueprints and sketches across the surface. "Good morning," he said brightly, gesturing for her to sit. "I want to show you something." Emma raised an eyebrow, suspicious but intrigued. "What is all this?" It's kind of a project," Alex explained, his enthusiasm bubbling over. "I've been thinking about ways to make life easier for families like yours. People who are struggling to get back on their feet, and I came up with an idea. Affordable housing complexes designed specifically for single parents. They'd have childcare facilities, job training programs, even community gardens. It's not much yet, just rough plans, but I thought maybe you could help me refine them." Emma stared at him, stunned. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. This wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire she had first met. It was someone entirely different, someone who cared enough to use his resources for something meaningful. "You're serious about this?" she asked cautiously. "Completely," Alex replied, meeting her gaze. "I can't undo what's happened to you, Emma, but I can try to prevent it from happening to others. Will you work with me on it?" Her initial instinct was to refuse. After everything she'd been through, trusting Alex felt like stepping onto thin ice. But as she looked at the sketches, the tiny details he had included, like play areas for children and shared laundry rooms, she realized he wasn't doing this for show. There was sincerity in his eyes, a quiet determination that mirrored her own. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "But only if we do it right. No shortcuts." Over the next few weeks, Alex and Emma poured their energy into the project. They spent hours discussing design ideas, visiting potential sites, and consulting with architects. For the first time since they had met, they worked as equals, each bringing something unique to the table. Emma's insights as a mother and someone who had experienced homelessness firsthand proved invaluable, while Alex's business acumen ensured the plan stayed practical and financially viable. Together, they created something neither could have accomplished alone. As they collaborated, their relationship began to shift in subtle but significant ways. The walls Emma had built around herself started to crumble, brick by brick. She noticed little things about Alex, the way he listened intently when she spoke, the genuine smile that lit up his face when Leela and Noah called him Dad, the quiet pride in his voice when he talked about making a difference. And Alex, in turn, saw Emma in a new light, not just as a survivor, but as a partner. Someone who challenged him, inspired him, and made him want to be better. Their bond deepened one rainy afternoon when the twins fell ill. Both Leela and Noah spiked fevers, leaving Emma frantic with worry. Alex, sensing her panic, sprang into action. He drove them to the emergency room, held Emma's hand during the long wait, and even stayed up all night beside her as the doctors monitored the children. When the fever finally broke and the twins drifted off to sleep, Emma turned to Alex, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done this without you." "You don't have to thank me," Alex replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That's what families do. They take care of each other." The word family lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, neither of them shied away from it. In that hospital room, surrounded by the hum of machines and the soft breathing of two sleeping children, they allowed themselves to imagine a future where they weren't just playing roles. They were truly connected. But outside their bubble of growing trust, trouble was brewing. Back in Alex's social circle, whispers about his unusual marriage had begun to circulate. His friends, who had initially. It was a crisp autumn morning when the storm finally broke. Emma had been scrolling through her phone, catching up on news headlines while sipping her coffee, when an article popped up that made her blood run cold. The headline read, "Billionaire's bet gone wrong. Did Alex Whitmore marry for love or laughs?" Beneath it was a grainy photo of her and Alex leaving the hospital with the twins just days earlier, followed by a scathing expose detailing the bet that had brought them together. Emma's hands trembled as she read the words aloud in her mind. According to the article, Alex's friends, Marcus included, had leaked the story to the press, painting him as a heartless manipulator who used her for entertainment. Every detail of their arrangement was laid bare: the drunken dare, the 6-month agreement, even the financial security promised in exchange for her participation. By the time she reached the end, tears blurred her vision, and anger burned in her chest. She stormed into Alex's study, where he sat reviewing documents at his desk. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with fury as she held up her phone. "You lied to me. This whole time, I thought maybe you cared about us. But it was all fake. Just some stupid game to you." Alex looked up, his face pale as he took in the article on her screen. For a moment, he said nothing, guilt etched across his features. Then, slowly, he stood and walked toward her. "Emma, please let me explain." "Explain what?" she snapped, backing away from him. "That this marriage was never real. That I'm just some pawn in your twisted little world. My kids and I. We trusted you, Alex, and now look at us. We're laughingstocks, thanks to you and your so-called friends." "I didn't know they'd do this," Alex said desperately, reaching out to her. "I swear, Emma, I didn't. When I agreed to the bet, it was reckless and selfish, yes, but it stopped being about that weeks ago. You have to believe me." Emma shook her head, refusing to meet his gaze. "Don't. Just don't. It doesn't matter anymore. Nothing you say can fix this." She turned and hurried out of the room, slamming the door behind him. For the rest of the day, Emma packed her things in silence, her movements mechanical but deliberate. The twins sensed her distress and clung to her legs, asking why Mommy was crying. She forced a smile for their sake, telling them everything would be okay, even though her heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. As much as she wanted to stay, to give Alex another chance, she couldn't ignore the truth. He had entered her life under false pretenses, and no amount of apologies could erase that. By evening, she had loaded the last of their belongings into a taxi waiting outside the penthouse. Alex found her in the lobby, pleading with her to reconsider. "Please, Emma," he begged, his voice raw with emotion. "I'll make this right. I'll shut down the story, deal with my friends. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't leave." "It's too late for that," she replied, her tone firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "You can't undo what's been done, Alex. Maybe someday you'll understand why this hurts so much. But right now, I need to protect my kids and myself from any more pain." With that, she stepped into the taxi, clutching Layla and Noah close as the driver pulled away from the curb. Alex stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching the car disappear into the city traffic. For the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him, heavier than anything he had ever experienced. Over the next few days, Alex threw himself into damage control. He issued public statements condemning his friend's actions, calling the bet a grave error in judgment, and vowing to make amends. Privately, he cut ties with Marcus and the others, severing connections that had once defined his life. But none of it mattered, not without Emma. Desperate to find her, he hired a private investigator to track her movements. After days of searching, he discovered she had moved into a modest apartment in a quieter part of the city. Knowing she wouldn't want to see him, he chose a different approach. Using his resources, he quietly ensured she received financial assistance, securing her rent payments and covering medical bills for the twins. He sent groceries to her doorstep and arranged for childcare services during her job interviews. Each gesture was small but meaningful, a way of showing her that he hadn't given up, even if she refused to speak to him. Weeks passed, and though Emma remained distant, she began to notice changes in her life. Bills that should have overwhelmed her were suddenly manageable. Strangers offered help without explanation, leaving her both grateful and confused. Deep down, she suspected Alex was behind it all, but pride kept her from reaching out. Still, as she tucked, the apartment was small but cozy, filled with the faint scent of lavender from a candle Emma had lit earlier. Alex stood awkwardly near the doorway, clutching the 2 cups of coffee like a lifeline. His usually polished appearance was replaced by something more subdued. His hair slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, and his eyes heavy with exhaustion. It was clear he hadn't slept much since she left. Emma crossed her arms over her chest, leaning against the kitchen counter. "What do you want, Alex?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with caution. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, but curiosity kept her rooted in place. "I wanted to see you," Alex admitted, setting the coffees down on the table. "To apologize again. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to hear me out." Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. "You've already said enough, Alex. What else is there to say?" "There's everything," he replied earnestly, taking a step closer. "I messed up, Emma. I messed up so badly. That bet, it was selfish, cruel, and completely thoughtless. But when I met you, when I got to know you and the twins, it stopped being about winning or losing. You changed me in ways I didn't think were possible." Emma raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Changed you? How? By making you feel guilty for using us?" "No," Alex said firmly, shaking his head. "By showing me what really matters. Before you, my life was empty. Success, money, power, they meant nothing because they didn't make me happy. But watching you fight for your kids every single day, seeing how much love and strength you have despite everything you've been through, it made me realize how shallow my own existence has been." He paused, searching her face for any sign of understanding. When she remained silent, he continued, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting the way I treated you. But I'm not giving up, Emma. Not on you, not on us. Because even if you never trust me again, I owe it to myself, and to the person you've helped me become, to try." Emma looked away, her throat tightening with emotion. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let herself hope that this wasn't just another act. But the scars ran deep, and trusting him again felt like stepping onto thin ice. "And what happens if I say no?" she asked quietly. "If I tell you to leave us alone for good?" Alex swallowed hard, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her question. "Then I'll respect your decision," he said after a long pause. "But I won't stop caring about you and the twins. Whether you want me in your lives or not, I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll never have to worry about anything ever again." His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant laughter of children playing outside. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How do I know this isn't just another lie?" "It's not," Alex said quickly, stepping closer until he was standing right in front of her. "I can't prove it to you overnight. Emma, trust takes time, and I understand that. All I can do is show you, day after day, that I mean what I say, that I'm willing to earn your faith, however long it takes." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she studied his face. There was no arrogance, no trace of the man who had once walked into her life with a reckless proposition. Instead, she saw vulnerability, regret, and a quiet determination that mirrored her own resilience. It scared her, how much she still cared about him despite everything. "Okay," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You can stay for now, but this doesn't mean we're okay. If you're serious about changing, you'll have to prove it. Every single day." Relief washed over Alex's face, followed by a flicker of hope. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all I ask, for a chance to make things right." Over the next few weeks, Alex became a constant presence in their lives. He helped Emma with grocery shopping, played board games with the twins, and even volunteered at the community center where she worked part-time. Each interaction was careful and deliberate, as though he was walking on eggshells, afraid of overstepping. Slowly but surely, the tension between them began to ease. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching Lila and Noah build a fort out of blankets, Emma turned to Alex. "Do you remember the first time we met?" she asked, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. Alex chuckled softly. "How could I forget? You looked at me like I was insane." "I thought you were," Emma admitted, laughing lightly. "Still kind of do, honestly." They shared a glance, the weight of their past lingering but no longer suffocating. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of her tiny apartment, months passed, and the bond between Alex and Emma grew stronger with each passing day. What had started as tentative steps toward reconciliation blossomed into something deeper, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared struggles, and an unspoken understanding of how far they had both come. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they no longer defined them. Instead, they served as reminders of the resilience that had brought them together. One crisp spring morning, Alex arrived at Emma's apartment carrying a picnic basket filled with homemade sandwiches, fresh fruit, and chocolate chip cookies he had baked himself. "I thought we could take the twins to the park," he said with a grin, holding up the basket like a trophy. "It's been too long since we did something fun as a family." Emma smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. Over the past few months, Alex had gone out of his way to create moments like this. Simple joys that reminded her of what it meant to feel safe and loved. She nodded, helping Lila and Noah into their jackets before heading outside. The four of them spent the afternoon laughing under the warm sun, chasing butterflies, and sharing stories about their favorite childhood memories. For the first time in years, Emma felt truly at peace. As the days turned into weeks, Alex continued proving himself, not just through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of kindness. He attended parent-teacher conferences for the twins, helped Emma study for her GED exam, and even joined her volunteer work at the community center. Each effort chipped away at the walls she had built around her heart, until one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from her balcony, Emma finally spoke the words Alex had been longing to hear. "I trust you," she said softly, turning to face him. Her voice was steady, yet there was a vulnerability in her eyes that made his chest tighten. "Not because you've done everything perfectly, but because I see how hard you're trying. And I think I'm ready to give us another chance." Alex's breath caught in his throat. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he intertwined them with hers. "You won't regret it, Emma," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll spend every day making sure of that." Their relationship evolved naturally after that conversation. They began rebuilding their lives together, not as strangers bound by a bet, but as equals committed to creating a future rooted in love and honesty. Alex sold his penthouse, choosing instead to move into a cozy home closer to Emma's community. It wasn't as luxurious, but it felt more like a home than any marble-floored apartment ever could. Together, they decorated the space with photos of the twins, handmade crafts, and mementos from their adventures. The affordable housing project they had worked on together also came to fruition, becoming a beacon of hope for struggling families in the city. Emma took on a leadership role within the initiative, using her experiences to guide others facing similar challenges. Meanwhile, Alex used his influence to secure funding and partnerships, ensuring the program's sustainability for years to come. Seeing the impact they were making side by side filled them both with a sense of purpose neither had experienced before. One evening, nearly a year after their rocky beginning, Alex surprised Emma with a quiet dinner at their favorite restaurant. As they sat across from each other, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emma's eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. "Emma," he began, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest, "you've given me so much, a second chance, a family, a reason to be better. I know our journey hasn't been easy, but it's taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other, flaws and all, every single day. Will you marry me? Not because of a bet or an arrangement, but because you're my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life." Tears streamed down Emma's face as she nodded, her heart swelling with joy. "Yes," she whispered, slipping the ring onto her finger. "1,000 times yes." When they returned home, Leela and Noah greeted them with hugs and giggles, completely unaware of the significance of the evening. As Alex tucked them into bed, Emma stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. In that moment, she realized how far they had come, from two broken souls brought together by circumstance to a family united by choice and love. Their wedding, held months later, was intimate and heartfelt. Surrounded by close friends, family, and members of the community they had helped rebuild, Alex and Emma